Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. Can I get some confirmation from the in-person people that they are able to see the screen?
I can see it.
Was that an in-person person or a Zoom call person?
In-person people can see.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. So, um, this is something that I've been stewing over for many years and thinking, I really do need to give this talk, however nervous I may be, or however hard it may be. I think, I have a lot to say, and I think much of it needs to be said. Um, so the title is Disabilities, Minorities, and Autism. Uh, and that makes it sound like autism is the third most important thing here, but make no mistake, it is the most important thing. It is what my talk is all about. This is my first talk at Seattle Atheist Church, and also the first time I'm giving this particular presentation, as I just finished working on it. So it may be a little rough, though I have written a blog post that covers some of these topics. Whoever just yawned might want to mute themselves. In fact, I'm a co-host. I might be able to mute everybody. Let's see. Let me stop the share for a second.
You're the only one who's unmuted. You can go ahead.
All right. You took care of it? Great. So anyway, subtitle here, what non-autistic people need to know about autism from the perspective of an autistic adult. So starting out, you may be wondering, what is autism? I have done a lot of research. I've studied this question for a long time. I still don't have a good answer, and there's a reason for that. Autism is kind of an ill-defined term. It's difficult to pin down, and the definition has changed quite a lot over the course of my lifetime. Even as a child, I was expressing frustration about how many things were being brought into the autism umbrella. How many different behaviors, how many different thought patterns. It all, everything was getting dumped into autism. And so autism became more and more nebulous. To give a simple answer here, I would say autism is a neurotype. That may not be a satisfying answer, but it's a set of behaviors. It's people act in certain ways, but it's hard to pin down in the sense that you may see two autistic people, where autism is sort of it it shows up in sort of opposite ways. Like maybe one autistic person is really good at math, and another person is really bad at math, and it's like that's just as much a part of their autism. It's like autism makes me bad at math, um, or maybe they're good at reading, maybe they're bad at reading, maybe they talk a lot, maybe they're completely silent. And it becomes such a hard to define, hard to pin down term. There are certain things that autistic people find in common with other autistic people most of the time or all of the time. Um, and I don't know if this will be helpful, but sometimes when I think of like what's at the core of autism, probably other autistic people might disagree, but I think in terms of like mechanical thinking, as opposed to organic thinking. And I think in terms of like being inside your own head as opposed to being in tune or in touch with the external world. I think of the word autism being like auto, being like self, and being self-satisfied in a way, and happy to stimulate yourself with your own thoughts, with your own actions, with your own behaviors, and not not needing like everybody else in the same way. Now, that might sound a little bit like introversion versus extroversion, but it is a different thing. Autistic people can be extroverted. Autistic people, can very much like interacting with other people, but it might manifest in a different way. So moving on to the next slide. Whenever you see a wall of text here, that's not going to be me talking. That's going to be like a quote from something. So I got a quote from an autistic writer here that I think helps illustrate autism. If you are autistic, that means you're an introvert. You can't be an extrovert. False, right? These are myths. If you are autistic, that means you are incapable of making eye contact or having close friends. False, right? That's another myth or a stereotype. If you're autistic, that means you're either really autistic or mildly autistic. Also false. And so many more. I am autistic because I have had lifelong struggles with social interactions. Only I started to mask more as I got older. Fitting in has never been easy for me. I always felt out of sync or like an alien. I am extremely sensitive, both emotionally and in a sensory processing sense. I struggle with attention and executive function. I can't multitask. I had many I had many developmental delays, including some that I never caught up to. I am an adult now. I struggle with motor coordination. I tend to ramble. I have special interests and hyperfixations. I am drained easily by the stimuli around me. I have meltdowns, many of which are quiet or even silent, as I've written about previously. I don't always notice when I've started to bore someone slash monopolize the conversation. My processing speed is slow. I have learning disabilities, ADHD, anxiety, and depression, like many autistics. I also have trauma from growing up undiagnosed. I struggle with handling changes and transitions, big or small. I am not flexible, often rigid in my thinking. I have low frustration tolerance. Mental pain is a much bigger deal to me than most physical pains. I struggle with eating at times because of sensory issues. I don't understand sarcasm well and take things literally, and the list goes on. And just because these traits are part of my autism, it doesn't mean somebody else who is completely different is not also autistic. Once you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. In other words, there's so much great and beautiful variation in this neurotype, one that can also be a challenging disability. So again, that was not me talking. That was an autistic writer, and from a blog post. And this website, themighty.com, it handles a lot of sort of mental health topics, etc., including autism. But so one thing about that passage that I do need to explain is the concept of masking. Started to mask more as I got older. So masking is when an autistic person learns to act normal, so to speak, learn to act like a non-autistic person in order to fit in with society. This is a very common thing, and it makes it so that you can't really tell whether or not somebody is autistic because many, if not most, autistic people are quite good at masking. And I think the point there is that autism is on the inside. You know, if you're trying to diagnose autism, it can be very difficult if you're only looking at like external behaviors because it's not about that. It's about how you think. It's about what's going on inside the brain. There's a lot you also might notice here, like hypersensitivity. That's very common. A lot of autistic people have sensory issues. They have hyperfixations, etc. But there is a lot here in this description. I thought this was a pretty good description of how an autistic person might be, but there's a lot I don't identify with. I don't have ADHD. I don't have learning disabilities. I'm not depressed, and so on. So yeah, it can mean all sorts of things. And, you might notice that some autistic people have meltdowns and, some don't. Some have good coping skills. One that can also be a challenging disability. So this leads into my
Andy.
notes. Sorry, somebody unmuted there. Is that fixed?
It's fixed.
Okay. So is autism a disorder / disability? I want to tackle these both at the same time because I don't think of these as like two different questions very much. I think of disorder and disability as much the same thing. So a lot of autistic people, maybe most, say yes. And certainly officially autism is considered a disorder. You may have heard of autism spectrum disorder. And one note about the spectrum, we should think of the spectrum in terms of, there's just a lot of different ways to be autistic, and not like a scale, like where you can have an autism score of 0 all the way to an autism score of 100. It's not like that. I don't really think of the autism spectrum very much. I think that probably helps, psychologists talk about it. It's not terribly relevant to me. I don't consider autism a disability. And I can explain why. So I don't think of autism as something I can't do. I think of autism as being more like left-handed, where it's just you are different and you are kind of able to do an equivalent set of things, but they don't align with how the world is set up. And so it may cause difficulties in that sense. One autistic person I talked to in preparation for this talk said that's why it's a disability. It's only a disability because of the world we live in, because of society. And if there were not inaccessibility issues, if the world was set up in a different way, then it wouldn't be a disability. Another autistic person I talked to said, yes, it is a disability, but when I asked, they still acknowledged that there are things that they can do because of autism that, for example, the hyperfocusing, the fixations, that allows them to learn more about certain things, that allows them to remember more about certain things. And it can be a sort of superpower in some ways. So that's how I feel about it. Also, I think this is a good point to bring up, because the title of this talk is Disabilities, plural. I want to bring up that when I was studying American Sign Language in college, we spent as much time learning about deaf culture as we did learning about the language. And there are a lot of surprising things that you might learn when you study what's called the deaf world. And when it turns out that many deaf people don't consider their deafness to be a disability, that blows hearing people's minds. I don't know if my thought that autism isn't a disability blows non-autistic people's minds. But it kind of blows my mind too. And I think because like logically I can think, isn't it always better to be able to do something than not? And the reasons why a deaf person might not consider it a disability are very complicated. And you have to be committed to learning about that in order for it to make any sense to you at all. But more on that later. So we're talking about labels. You may have heard of what's called Asperger syndrome. This it has kind of fallen out of use. It's known as a sort of outdated term among the medical establishment. And what it means is it was like autism, a sort of umbrella term where a lot of behaviors and traits were sort of being thrown into this bag for anybody who seemed like weird or off or autistic. but mildly so. Somebody who could function in society, like everybody else, but they were eccentric in some ways. They were autistic, but not really super autistic. Um, and that's Asperger's syndrome. I don't really use this term, not just because it's fallen out of style, but also because it relates to the idea of functioning labels. So functioning labels are if you say low functioning or high functioning. You might say low functioning or high functioning autism. And the first time I heard that, I thought I was very confused because it made it sound like the autism itself was either low functioning or high functioning. And it sort of gave me the opposite impression, because they mean, does the person function well in society, or do they not function very well? And so high functioning is a label given to autistic people who, can hold a job and make friends and stuff. And so that's why Asperger's syndrome is often associated with high functioning autism. And low functioning, you can sort of think of Rain Man, if anybody's familiar with that movie, um, where you can't communicate in any meaningful way, and so you can't really interact with society. Now, the reason I bring up functioning labels is because if you talk to most autistic people, they will not like that. They don't want you to say high functioning or low functioning. Part of the reason is that high functioning denies people support, and low functioning denies them agency. You think, you treat them like a child, basically. It infantilizes them. And so yeah, in general, we say, don't use those. Just, be specific. It's like we can understand why that would help to sort of to be a very quick explanation for what somebody's deal is, but it's better to just be specific, like, oh, this person, needs these specific accommodations, or they have these specific behaviors, in a concise way. But yeah, we don't like functioning labels. And also talking about language. This is a very big topic, and I can talk about this quite a lot. You may have heard of person first language versus identity first language. And what this means is you may have heard terms like, I have autism, he has autism, she has autism, and person with autism and people with autism. That is person first language. And identity first language is, I am autistic, he is autistic, she is autistic, they are autistic, and autistic people and autistic person. So autism can still be used if you're as a word, if you're using identity first language, but you use the word autistic when appropriate. Person first language erases the word autistic and only ever uses autism or autism spectrum disorder or ASD, etc. If you can't guess which one autistic people prefer, overwhelmingly they prefer person first. No, sorry, overwhelmingly they prefer identity first language and hate person first language. For me, person first language grates on my nerves. Absolutely. And it may seem petty, like, oh, it's just words, it's just language, why does it matter so much? There are reasons why this is very important to me. And one of the reasons is that it represents, because autistic people prefer IFL by default. When I hear people using PFL, that tells me something. That tells me that they don't listen to autistic people. And that's kind of one of the most major themes of this talk is listening to autistic people like you're doing now. So a big proponent of person-first language, a big reason person-first language is so popular, is an organization called Autism Speaks. You may have heard of this. It is the biggest, most well-funded organization related to autism. It is technically a charity. And I recently saw a billboard where I live here in Florida, driving by the road for Autism Speaks. It's quite a big deal. It's quite enormous. But if you talk to actually autistic people, you may hear something to the effect of Autism Speaks being a hate group. And this is something along the lines of why people might call, you know, PETA a hate group. You know, it purports to help animals, whereas, you know, it actually kills animals, and is actually very harmful. Autism Speaks is similarly very harmful. And the purpose of the organization has nothing to do with helping autistic people. It has everything to do with non-autistic people who have some, you know, autistic child in their lives. So it's for parents. It was founded by grandparents of an autistic child. It's for other family members like siblings. It's sort of support like that. It's not for autistic people. But the name makes it sound like it is. You know, it's certainly a nice feel-good thing, like, oh, I'm listening to autistic people, when you're really not. And so the name is a misnomer. It should be called Speaking Over Autism. So I've got a little blurb here that is from Washington Post. This is not some fringe website or fringe opinion. Autism Speaks has run high-profile advertising and fundraising campaigns suggesting that autism is a malevolent force that afflicts families and makes parents miserable. A few smaller groups like Cure Autism Now and Defeat Autism Now predated Autism Speaks, but none have had its massive budget and wide reach. The narratives about autism that Autism Speaks has put forth have defined and shaped autism in the public imagination. Toxic parenting myths like make life harder for people with autism. That much must change. Autism Speaks goals have seemed to change little. Last summer, it partnered with Sesame Street to promote a toolkit for parents of newly diagnosed children that, among other things, compares autism to leukemia and suggests that mourning is a normal response to learning of an autism diagnosis. There is an entire section of the toolkit that walks parents through the Kubler-Ross stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Many parents must mourn the loss of some of the hopes and dreams they had for their child before they can move on. The guide notes in the section on sadness: autism is neither degenerative nor a fatal condition. No one dies of autism, but the rhetoric in the toolkit made autism diagnosis sound as though the child has died. Now, the title of this article is Biggest Autism Advocacy Group is still failing too many autistic people. I don't quite like that title because still failing too many autistic people makes it sound like it's trying to do a good thing and just isn't doing enough of that. I don't think it's trying to do a good thing. I don't want it to improve. I don't want it to get better. I want it to go away. I want people to go to other groups, other organizations instead. I think, you know, if Autism Speaks was learning how to be better, I think they would just say, you know what, we're gonna disband this organization and point people towards better ones. That's how I feel about it. I know it may be harsh, but let's have a look at an actual ad that Autism Speaks created, which I think is sort of comical in how exaggerated it is. Like, this is a cartoon villain.
I am autism. I'm visible in your children, but if I can help it, I am invisible to you until it's too late. I know where
Sorry, I got it on double speed here.
you live. And guess what? I live there too. I hover around all of you. I know no color barrier, no religion, no morality, no currency. I speak your language fluently, and with every voice I take away, I acquire yet another language. I work very quickly. I work faster than pediatric AIDS, cancer, and diabetes combined. And if you are happily married, I will make sure that your marriage fails. Your money will fall into my hands, and I will bankrupt you for my own self-gain. I don't sleep, so I make sure you don't either. I will make it virtually impossible for your family to easily attend a temple, a birthday party, a public park, without a struggle, without embarrassment, without pain. You have no cure for me. Your science.
Okay, I think that's probably enough of that, but you know, you get the picture. This is very much like vilifying autism. I think it's clear like who the audience is for this commercial, and it's not autistic people. And I think it's reasonable to think, you know, maybe autistic people don't like to see autism vilified in this way. But you know, Autism Speaks didn't make this commercial for autistic people, now did it? To explain a little piece of why I don't like person first language and why it grates on my nerves so much is like, I have autism sounds like I have cancer. It does, it sounds like a disease. And like I said, I don't even think of it as a disability. I don't think of it as something I have. I think of it as something I am, and I'm not ashamed of it. And I, you know, you heard that this ad here is making it out to be this sort of horrible, debilitating disease, and you know that it makes sense why they would use person first language for that. So Autism Speaks uses a puzzle piece as its logo. You've probably seen the puzzle piece associated with autism a lot. Autistic people don't like that either. You may see like an infinity symbol, like a rainbow infinity symbol, which is what autistic people prefer. But yeah, the puzzle piece is another like kind of red flag. It's a dead giveaway. Oh, these people don't represent autism. They don't speak to autistic people. They speak to non-autistic people who speak over us, who claim to speak for us. So here's another blurb here. To autistic people, the puzzle piece represents negativity about autism, not a positive perspective of autism. A second issue for autistic people is the puzzle piece also represents viewing us as puzzling or a mystery, often terms used in the past referring to autism. For autistic people, this is problematic as we don't wish to be viewed as akin to a puzzle piece that can't be worked out. Autistic people tend to use a rainbow infinity symbol as connected to the neurodiversity perspective. For autistic people, if they see an organization or parents using the puzzle piece and they know the history of the puzzle piece, they will assume an organization does not consult with actual autistic people and may find that problematic. Or they may assume an organization disregards their feelings towards the symbol and find that very disrespectful. Yeah, that's largely what I've been saying. So on that note, you know, as the puzzle piece sort of indicates that people are talking over us, you know, the people don't care to use autistic people as their source of information. That leads into the probably most major topic here, which is representation. Now, this is the point where I want to talk about much more than just autism. I want to speak in broader terms about representation for everyone. And I want to talk about how almost every group, every marginalized group has been has gone through a sort of common thread where they have not been allowed to portray themselves. And I want to start with a clip from Shakespearean Love.
A woman on the stage. A woman! I say this theatre is closed.
Why, sir?
For lewdness and unshamefacedness. and for displaying a female on the public stage.
So the reason I show this clip is because, you know, this movie isn't an example of the kinds of movies I want to talk about, but it does show something that, you know, happened in history, which was men playing women. You know, that was done on the stage, of course, because society had moved past that by the time movies were invented. And you know, there were already plenty of women who were actors. But this idea, you know, this voice of somebody getting up in arms about a woman on the stage, I want that to sort of be in your mind as a common thread, as people getting upset about, you know, anybody else being on the stage or on the screen, and thinking on understanding how ridiculous it is. But you've seen, like, throughout history, men playing women, white people playing non-white people. You know, that even after movies were invented, you would have blackface and, you know, yellowface and you know, racial minorities not being able to portray themselves, and that still goes on today in terms of whitewashing and, you know, all manner of minority groups being spoken over, characters being rewritten so that white people can play them, and that sort of thing. You see straight people playing gay people, and you certainly see cis people playing trans people. Now, in the clip I just showed, that displayed a sort of mindset of, oh, I understand that women are capable of being actors, but I think it's wrong for them to do that, right? I think it's inappropriate for whatever reason. And I want to contrast that with the mindset that doesn't think about it, that just has an underlying subconscious assumption, a presumption, that, you know, only men can be actors or only white people can be actors, you know, because that's just part of their culture, and they've never thought to ask the question. They never, you know, thought to see things otherwise. So I want to talk about this problem of cis people playing trans people. The assumption tied to trans face is that Hollywood is a discriminatory industry which would rather cast a cisgender, non-trans movie star who can be transformed to look like a transgender person through diet and cosmetics than consider a minority actor with an authentic life experience for that role. Leto, referring to Jared Leto, is not alone in experiencing pushback from casting. Jill Soloway, the creator of Transparent, was also confronted by a trans activist during a preview screening of the series at Outfest, a prominent LGBT film festival in Los Angeles. The activist, Ashley Love, criticized Soloway's casting of cisgender actor Jeffrey Tambor from Arrested Development as the trans lead Maura, a character inspired by the journey of her own parent who transitioned late in life. It's humiliating. We feel misgendered, Love said of the casting of Tambor, who she identified as a popular male actor chosen over a number of trans actresses who auditioned. She made a direct comparison to the actor's donning of a wig and skirt to blackface, where white men would dress up as black men, according to Boing Boing. So this next blurb, it comes from a very gross article. I didn't even want to finish reading it, but this one passage jumped out at me, and so I wanted to bring attention to it. It goes, I believe those LGBTQ advocates who claimed a victory after shaving Johansson into withdrawing from Rub and Tug don't realize they have made it nearly impossible to get made films like Brokeback Mountain and Dallas Buyers Club, the kind that open hearts and minds. At least not with any kind of decent budget and P&A spend. not when film companies know they might be shamed on social media by groups who now feel empowered to demand who plays the lead role, even if their candidates have no bankable value. So the chance to see their struggles and triumphs played out in anything but a micro-budget indie movie or TV show has been extinguished. So the incredible place of privilege, like I'm just imagining the writers of this article, coming from this place of, oh, it's just annoying to them that, some trans movie might be made. And it's like, oh, I gotta deal with that now. And they think, look at all the stuff we're doing for you. We're making these movies like Brokeback Mountain, which involved straight people playing gay people, and Dallas Buyers Club, which involved, like Rub and Tug, involved cis people playing trans people. And they're saying this like, oh, look how good this is for, gay people or trans people. It's like, that's all we deserve, or that's all minorities deserve. That's all marginalized groups deserve, is, being represented by somebody else, being portrayed by somebody else. And we should be grateful for that. Like, we shouldn't get to play ourselves. So that all ties into the subconscious presumption of ineptitude. That's a term I'm coining to refer to that second mindset I referred to earlier. It is subconscious, it's ingrained, it's intrinsic, it's implicit. We don't think about it. We don't consider the question, hey, maybe trans people should get to play themselves. And I keep bringing up trans people because this is something I, as an actor, have often thought about. As I saw cis person after cis person playing a trans person, I thought growing up, wow, that sounds like the ultimate acting challenge. Maybe someday I would have to play a trans person. How would I go about that? And just thinking it in terms of like acting and like what a challenge that would be, and not thinking in terms of, should I be doing that? Should that role go to me? Because it was such a subconscious presumption that of course cis people play trans people. What's the alternative? It never occurred to me to even ask a question, can trans people play themselves? I didn't think in terms of trans actors. I just thought in terms of myself. There was a lot of transphobia there to work through that was ingrained in me in society. And as you might guess, I'm saying all this because, I have to put things in perspective. Maybe people think the same way about autistic people. Maybe people would never consider me for an autistic role because of that same mindset. Of course, autistic people can't play themselves. There are no autistic actors. How could there be? Right? They don't even ask the question. They don't even look. It's just, oh, non-autistic actors out there, taking on autistic roles as a challenge. And that's what I've been seeing throughout my whole life growing up. And so I want to play a little clip here. This is Maysoon Zayed, who has palsy and who is giving a TED talk here about her experience with this very topic.
In my senior year, ASU decided to do a show called They Dance Real Slow in Jackson. It's a play about a girl with CP. I was a girl with CP. So I start shouting from the rooftops, I'm finally gonna get part. I have cerebral palsy. Free at last, free at last. Thank God almighty I'm free at last. I didn't get the part. Sherry Brown got the part. I went racing to the head of the theater department, crying hysterically like someone shot my cat, to ask her why. And she said it was because they didn't think I could do the stunts. I said, excuse me, if I can't do the stunts, neither can the character.
Yeah, that was her experience. Like, and I've been thinking about that a lot, just thinking, oh yeah, you can't do the stunts, you can't do it, how could you? You're inept. So when I ask people about how they think autism is portrayed in movies and TV, I came across this this Facebook thread. Now it's quite a long thread. I didn't read all of it, but I want to give you at least a few examples here of the stereotypes that people are seeing. Autism on TV, a narcissist who's an outright dick to everyone and hurts feelings on purpose. Autism in real life, bundle of nerves and anxiety and almost in tears at the idea that something they say or do might hurt another person, rehearses conversations, picks them apart after. Autism on TV, I'm a human supercomputer solving the world's most complex mathematical and technological mysteries. Autism in real life, I need to mentally rehearse making a phone call to a customer service rep for the 1000th time, and then I want quiet for the rest of the day. Autism on TV, cannot express or feel affection. Autism in real life, I require constant giving and receiving of hugs, even from my enemies. I cannot allow an inanimate object to fall from its proper place because I need it to feel safe and happy. And it goes on and on like this. And again, as you might guess, some of these autism in real life things I do identify with, and some of them I don't. But finally, it's time to show you an example of an autistic person being portrayed by a non-autistic actor in the movie Temple Grandin. Okay.
I don't know that I want to hear from any more experts.
Now, you might guess that the experts she's talking about here are not themselves autistic.
With intensive psychotherapy, an autistic child can be treated.
The report plainly shows that autism is not a psychological problem.
I am not familiar with the Rimland report.
Calm down, sweetie. Sweetie, calm down.
It would be better if you could get her to sit calmly. You're trying to control her.
What are you talking about?
But we were told self-stimming is good. It eventually calms them.
Self-stimming has self-comfort.
So Temple Grandin is seeing here an autistic child in the room,
Spinning is good.
reminding herself of her own childhood.
Too. Self-stimulation does seem to eventually calm the nervous system. It can be a way to compensate for not being held. And being held by another person is scary, but rolling or being held by surfaces produces the calming effect that ordinary children get from a hug.
How old's your child?
Well, I don't have children. No, I'm autistic. And I need the sensation.
So the reason I picked this specific clip to show you is because of how important that moment was of everybody thinking, oh, this is an adult. So clearly she can't be autistic. In their minds, autistic people are children. That's the whole narrative that they're thinking in terms of. Autistic people are children. There's only autistic children. There are no autistic adults. And that's the entire lens that they view autism through. They infantilize autistic people and think, you know, what do we do about them? You know, they can't speak for themselves, of course. Now, I'm not here to criticize Claire Danes' performance about, you know, portraying an autistic person, however good or bad she did, however accurate it was towards this real life person, Temple Grandin, real life autistic person, however accurate it was, she shouldn't have gotten the role. Like, this should have gone to an actual autistic person. So next up, okay, I haven't seen this movie, but I have seen the trailer, and I want to show you a little snippet from it because the first minute of the trailer is endearing you to this character, but I'm gonna skip.
Were you excited?
What?
Sexually, because I was.
Thank you. I should be going now.
Because I said that thing about being sexually excited?
No. Well, yeah.
I have this thing that's called Asperger's syndrome.
Oh.
Albert Einstein, Thomas Jefferson, Mozart.
They had Asperger's?
Probably.
So that's a common conception. A lot of people will try to claim historical figures and say, oh, they probably, you know, were autistic before we understood autism and couldn't have diagnosed them at the time. I don't really like to do that. But of course, I played this clip because of this portrayal of an autistic character is like, oh, I'm autistic, so I can't possibly learn how to be sexually appropriate around women. You know, that's just beyond me, and I'm always justified. And also, when challenged, I can say, oh, look at all of these geniuses who were also autistic, and sort of claim them for myself in order to bolster my case. And for some reason, that appears to be convincing to this woman who had just been made very uncomfortable. Next up, I want to give a clip from Sesame Street. So Sesame Street partnered with a certain organization, and if you can't guess what organization that was, the organization is Autism Speaks. Sesame Street wanted, to sort of jump on this autism bandwagon and say, hey, we can talk about autism too.
You're really good at painting. High five, Julia. Huh? Huh? High five? Huh? Huh? Huh, Ellen. I don't think Julia likes me very much.
Oh, no, you two are just meeting for the first time.
Oh, so she's shy. Oh, I get that. I can feel shy sometimes, too.
Well, with Julia, it's not just that. You see, she has autism. She likes it when people know that.
So I wanted to play the clip for that long to see if you caught the person first language in the clip, because that's something I can never not notice, right? It grates on my nerves. It's speaks very loudly to me. So after those portrayals, I wanted to look up actual autistic actors, because it's like my whole life there have been just no examples of this at all. That's changing a little bit. There was a show called Lock and Key, which has an actual autistic actor in it, who's playing a sort of eccentric person who's apparently not explicitly autistic, but people say, oh yeah, the character's probably autistic. There are some other examples, but the big one that I came across was called Everything's Gonna Be Okay. And that has an actual autistic actor playing an autistic main character. And so I'll show a little bit of a clip of that.
Frustrated when I always made things about myself. But he is dead now. Surprise! Let's get this white girl wasted! Your experiment was inherently flawed. If you can't be helpful, I don't need you here. Did you wet the bed? I have autism. My dad's biggest regret is vaccinating me.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I don't know if you noticed the person first language that time, but my dad's biggest regret is vaccinating me. Oof. I haven't seen this show. Apparently it has its ups and downs, but also apparently I'm not the only. Apparently there are a lot of autistic viewers who were excited about it, but don't consider this to be like great representation still. It seems like it should be, because look, an autistic actor playing an autistic character. And I say, well, that's not good enough because the writer's not autistic or the director's not autistic. Surprise, surprise. The creator of the show, Josh Thomas, has, after he started making the show, has gotten diagnosed as autistic. And so I don't have that complaint either. Why does this just not feel good enough? It doesn't feel like good representation. A lot of other autistic people have talked about why just a lot of the themes in the show don't really go in the direction they should. There's functioning labels, there's person first language. It's really not talking about autism in the way that it should be, even if this is sort of the best we got so far. And so that's the end of the slideshow. The conclusion, the takeaway, I think, has to necessarily be listen to autistic people, right? If you have any questions, if you're wondering, where do I go? What organizations do I support? Don't listen to non-autistic people who speak for us, right? Talk to the source. Autistic people are allowed to represent themselves. Autistic people are the foremost experts on autism, no matter how much a non-autistic person has studied autism. And if you're wondering whether to use person first language or identity first language, go with identity first language as the default. This seems like some people will say, oh, well, if some autistic people prefer person first language, like Kayla Cromer, the actor in Everything's Gonna Be Okay. I've seen her writing as well, and she does use person first language. But you might say, oh, well, it doesn't matter which I use because, you know, it could go either way. You need to use identity first language as the default, which is going to be, and you're going to be needing a default most of the time because you're talking about autistic people, you know, rather than just talking to a specific person. So yeah, that's really important. And I feel like I've taken a very long time, so I'm gonna say thank you very much and end the talk.